There's an approach called polyvagal theory, and it talks about the different nervous system states that we can find ourselves in when we're in a place of relaxation, when we're in a place of fight flight, or when we're in a place of freeze, disconnected from the world. Instead of delving into a book, I was delving into myself. It was crazy. I can extract that and share it with the world. I would sit with her, and she was so depressed. She'd been through so much. There was so much trauma that had happened in her life. And I'd really struggled with her. I was trying to apply models, it just wasn't working. Now I was showing up with this new energy, with this high vibration state. And things started to change. The first session I had back with her, my only job in that session for me was to stay in high vibration. I shared with her, I think you're different because I'm different. And, that was the most powerful session I had ever had in my entire life. I used to feel so fortunate after doing meditation. I used to walk out of the meditation and be like, I feel like I've won the lottery. I don't know why. I just feel like I've won the lottery. And my husband used to roll his eyes at me, but he knew what I meant.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Illuminating Dialogues number 21. We have the pleasure of talking to Dr. Darshan Kaur today. Thank you for coming on, Dr. Darshan Kaur.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. And I'm excited to go through and talk about a variety of topics. But before we do so, for viewers who are not familiar with yourself, I'd like to give you a short introduction. Dr. Darshan Kaur is a clinical psychologist experienced in a variety of approaches, including person-centered therapy, mindfulness, CBT, and acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. Dr. Darshan Kaur also incorporates spirituality and meditation into her therapeutic work. Alongside this, Dr. Darshan Kaur is an associate for Sikh Mind, who I know are doing an amazing work, and of course, a seeker of truth. It's a pleasure to have you on. I'm looking forward to going into your therapy practice, how you're helping clients, how you're balancing it all, and maybe for those who are not experienced in Sikh and Gurbani, perhaps delving into this too. What is Simran? But before we do so, this podcast is called Illuminating Dialogues. It's a space where we can journey together, perhaps where we haven't gone before, and illuminate ourselves and also the listeners. So with that being said, my first question to you is, what lights you up?
Thank you. It's wonderful to be part of this conversation. What lights me up is my internal practice and being able to share the benefits of that with others. For a long time, I was quite disconnected from my internal self and the internal journey. I was that was even in the midst of being a psychologist and being on this path of Sikhi. So I really connected with psychological models, and I really liked the idea of helping people with that knowledge. And I really connected with Sikhi and spirituality and Kirtan and Gurbani. So I had a lot of knowledge, you could say, or I thought I did, had a lot of knowledge. So, if you were to ask me questions, I could answer them based on Gurbani, based on psychology. But when I really looked at myself, and I think I've done that a lot at different phases in my life, but the time when I had to do that the most was when I got married. And before that, I thought I was a brilliant person, very self-developed, self-aware. And I just thought, how lucky is Harbi to be married to me, getting married to me. It can't go wrong. I'm a psychologist. I'm into Sikhi, and it did. It all went pear-shaped. And I had no idea really what I was getting myself into and how much I would have to really see myself as me for the first time in my life, pretty much. And that's where my internal journey started, my and I can go into it later, or I can go into it now. Don't know what's helpful.
Yeah, maybe we can start with, I guess, how you could start of how you actually started of getting deeper into the Sikh in terms of the spiritual aspects and how that
Yeah.
coincided with your clinical practice. Because,
Oh yeah.
like you mentioned, there are some parallels there, and so I
Oh,
think the
massive.
viewers might be interested, whether they're coming from one side or another, how that sort of came about for you.
So I'm gonna skip forward a little bit then,
Mm,
because I really would love to share what I would call my personal transformation journey story.
mm,
And I don't use those words lightly because transformation is a big word, you know. And prior to this experience, I would have never used that language.
mm.
I would have really shied away from it. I would have used the words development,
Okay.
and kind of softer words. But transformation is a big word, you know. It implies that, you know, you change from one thing into something completely different,
Mm,
you know. Um, and it was during lockdown when I'm getting emotional because these moments are very precious to me. This journey, this story. So been married for some time, had two children at that point, and I'd been doing a lot of work on myself in terms of trying to connect with meditation a bit more. Because
mm,
before that, I'd been really in my head quite a lot. So I'd learned a lot, read a lot of books, knew all the theories, could do really good at job interviews and things like that. But when it came to my internal self development and day to day issues, I really struggled, you know, with my relationship with my husband, with being a mother. Anger was a really big part of my life. You know, it just followed me around wherever I would go. I would try my best not to be angry, but it would just come up, both in my relationship, both with my children, and I just couldn't seem to get a handle on it, even though I was a psychologist at that time.
mhm,
So I was trying to help others whilst trying to go on this internal journey myself. So so I started to kind of delve into meditation. I found it really difficult at the beginning. I couldn't connect with it. I was so used to being analytical and, um, you know, not tapping into the body,
mm,
not kind of um, relying on internal wisdom or intuition or self. It was more, I felt like I needed to fill my mind with knowledge from the outside so that I could appear clever and things like that. So, um, I had started to go on this internal journey where I started to go into Sangat, into places where meditation was happening. My husband was a keen meditator, and he was really the inspiration behind it because he was developing himself. He was changing in front of my eyes, and I was thinking, how's he doing this? Like, you know, like, and he was just he used to show up very much in a state of sage, calm, peace. You know, I would be the one arguing with myself pretty much because he'd just be like, okay, like he just wouldn't take the bait in arguments. And, you know, he was just very, he just, it was my inspiration. He was always showing up in a joyful state, really working on himself. I used to see him doing gratitude journals. I used to see him really focusing on his self development. And Simran was a big part of that. And I used to analyze him from a psychology lens. I used to be like, your mother was like this, your dad was like this, you've had all this trauma. How are you showing up like this? It can't be real, you know? And I just used to bring all these formulations into the picture. And, but he just used to just surprise me just every day that he was just able to transform himself and, you know, develop himself day in, day out and work on that. Despite any of his background, his trauma, his history, you know, that didn't even show up. It seemed it was like, where the hell is all that? You know, you're you're really just kind of sidestepping that in a way. And so then that's where the journey started. And I was like, look, I've got to do something because I'm struggling over here and all my cleverness isn't working. And even though I know more than him and I can, you know, recite psychology theories, I can't change myself and I don't feel happiness and peace within myself. So then I started this journey, started meditating a bit, and then the universe, Vaiguruji, brought forth more opportunities to do that. So there was some sangat, some women that used to meet in Slough, and it's called Vichar Group. So it's like a self-discovery circle. And I started to attend that, where there was meditation happening and talk about self-discovery, self-development happening. And then I started to experience some moments of peace in meditation. It took me a while, but I started to, through inspiration, sitting in Sangat doing Simran, and experiencing more and more pain. I just had to keep going. Sometimes I'd be like, no, I'm fine. I don't need to do this meditation stuff. Or I can do something else. Or reading gurbani is enough. Or doing kirtan's enough. I'm going to stick with what I know, and it's good. But then the conflict would come. Then the depression would come. Then the extreme anger, the self-hate, dislike would come. And it just wasn't enough. What I was doing wasn't enough for that.
Mm.
So that just kept on pushing me again and again. Okay, really, I kept going back to meditation. I just, somewhere, my soul knew that it's what I needed, but my mind was just so used to a different way of being, and my body was used to a different way of being, that it just took a while for it to come around. So there I was, starting to get into meditation, starting to experience changes within myself, glimpses of peace, where I was doing the meditation. So I would do Vaheguru Simran, Gurmantar. I also did other things like breath meditation, and they were all brilliant. But I would do the Simran, I would chant the mantra, I would immerse myself in that experience. And I started to feel moments of peace. I started to experience moments where I was disconnecting from that analytical mind of mine, that mind that I thought was so wise, that had served me so well. And I started entering into this kind of void space where there were no thoughts, where there was no intellect, where there's no more analysis anymore, but it's just being. It's just fully being and immersing in the moment, in this presence, which I later came to realize was presence of Vaheguru, presence of the divine, presence of the universe, the supreme energy, the supreme consciousness. And as I started to spend more and more moments within that state, um, I started to feel, um, from the inside, things like joy welling up within me, love welling up from within me. I used to feel so fortunate after doing meditation. I used to walk out of the meditation and be like, I feel like I've won the lottery. I don't know why. I just feel like I've won the lottery. And my husband used to roll his eyes at me, but he knew what I meant. But I was like, what? I can experience all these things from inside? Like, this is crazy. Like, I've been living from outside in this whole time, like, waiting for the next career opportunity, or the next child, or the next holiday, or the next samagam, or the next Ranspa, or the next camp. I've been waiting for things to happen around me, to feel connected, to feel light, to feel joy, to feel good, to feel confident, to feel competent. I didn't know it was all inside of me. I didn't know. And so when I started experiencing this stuff, I was like, I'm onto something here, But still, the forces of subconscious mind, the Panchjor, the nervous system and brain that had become wired to be a certain way, kept pulling me back into that old state of being. And I used to forget that meditation was the thing I needed, that was bringing me so much joy, until the next episode of suffering came up in my life. And then I would be forced to go back to meditation again. And and through that process, over years, 2, 3 years, I started to really deepen my relationship with meditation. It just started to get deeper and deeper, because every time I would walk away from it, I would realize how much and desperately I needed it again. So I would then go back into it again, and then I would go deeper into it, because I just knew that there was a whole world within this meditation, and I was just starting to scratch the surface.
Thank you for
It's,
sharing all of that so far. I think it's so relatable, and would resonate with me, especially when you were saying like the books or the intellects or the psychological systems. And when I've been discussing with my clients as well, it's like we're always trying to hold on to some sort of model to navigate ourselves, whether it be like internal family systems or Garbamati's work, which are all great. I think the way you share it, from the Sikhi lens, but also from like the nervous system or the science lens, whoever part relates to the listeners today, is the fact that you're spending time in that space almost. That's a transformation. And something that resonated with me is like even going on holiday or going to camps and stuff. We're still waiting to go there almost, which is so funny. And I'm just wondering, like, how did you start to um, so it's starting to work with you and of course with the meditations. But how did you start to, as a clinical psychologist, as a professional, um, because from the outside lens, religion or um, a certain way of doing things may seem as separate from a clinical practice. But from your perspective, how did you start to integrate Gurmat with um, with the people sitting in front of you? Because in many ways, it is that it's working with the mind, and of course something deeper. So how did you start to integrate that together?
Yeah, so really, really good question. And this bit is, I'm really excited to share with you because it's precisely that. So I was doing all of this. So lockdown came about and, work reduced. I wasn't physically seeing people anymore. We were doing a little bit of online work, but there was a big gap where I wasn't really working. And my husband and I were at home, and the two children were being homeschooled at that time. And it was difficult, and we made a decision to take shifts with the children. So um, so right now I'm in an outbuilding which is just at the end of the garden in my house, and so what we decided to do was I would take 4 hours out and stay in the outbuilding, and then we would tag and he would come and stay in the outbuilding
Nice.
and do whatever we needed to do, work related, personal development related, just getting some time away, so that we could be a bit more sane and good with the children as well. And this is where my journey really just started to develop further. So I was at that point in my practice at a place where I was starting to disconnect from my work
Mm,
because I was applying models like CBT, and all of them are great models, but I was applying them from a place of disconnect from myself.
mm,
I was feeling that people weren't getting better, and I really wasn't really connected with the tools I was using. I trained in them and I was familiar with them, but I wasn't connecting on a personal level. I never really used them on myself, and I never would, because at that point, Sikhi was a big part of my healing and my own self development, but I just couldn't integrate the two. So I was like, here I am in a profession where I'm trying to heal or support development using foreign models that I don't use myself. And in my private space, I'm connecting with Sikhi in a deep way. I'm on this journey with meditation. But this feels like gold. Like, how is this not coming through in my being, in my work? And then this is where things started to just started to fall into place magically almost. So I was spending that time doing more meditation, spending sometimes hours, 1, 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours, just immersing myself in a meditative practice because I had this 4 hour chunk. And as I started falling in love with the meditation, I started wanting to do more and more. At the beginning, it was a chore to even sit down for 10 minutes. But as I started feeling those feelings inside of me, and starting to notice these changes that seem to be happening spontaneously in my day to day life with my children, with my husband, less reactivity, more love, more tolerance, more patience, more sensitivity. Those things started to happen inside of me almost without me trying at all. I hadn't read any more books, I hadn't suddenly gone on a course, but the meditation was starting to change me from the inside. And this is when it started to hit me that everything that I need is inside of me, right? Everything that I need for myself and to share with other people is inside of me. And if I go deep enough and spend enough time there, I can extract that and share it with the world. Okay. So this was instead of delving into a book, I was delving into myself. It was crazy. And Gurbani says, Gurmukha hove so kaya khoje, hor sab param pulani. Gurmukh hove so kaya khoje. And in Gurbani it says the Gurmukh is the one who searches the body. Kaya is body. Is the one that goes on that internal khoj of the body. And everything is there. Sab kish kar mein hai, bahar nahi, bahar tolle so param pulahi. Everything is within the home of the house of this body. That's our home. Sab kish kar mein, bahar nahi. It's not outside of us, it's inside of ourselves. So everything was matching up. I was like, wow, Guru's right. And this path is right. You know, I used to believe in God, kind of. I used to believe in Sikhi, kind of. But this was me really experiencing it as truth for the first time in my whole life. And so then what started to happen was I was doing this internal Simran. I was going on this discovery. I was becoming transformed. And then I would seek inside of me, how can I bring this into my work? So I would go on the internet actually, and I would spend a bit of time at the end of my meditation just looking around at what's out there around meditation, around psychology. And this is when certain ways of conceptualizing the mind, the body, and doing this psychological work started coming up for me that I'd never been exposed to before. So things like nervous system models. There's an approach called polyvagal theory, and it talks about the different nervous system states that we can find ourselves in when we're in a place of relaxation, when we're in a place of fight flight, or when we're in a place of freeze, disconnected from the world. And I started to see how this, like that nervous system model wasn't applying labels to people like you're depressed, you're anxious, you've got this, you've got that. But it was like everything is inside of us. That place of peace, that place you can call home where everything feels good and feels whole, you feel complete, that's inside of you. As is that state where we can get into this fight flight where we feel stressed, anxious, nervous, depressed is inside of us. As is that space where we become dissociated, suicidal, engage in self-harm, psychotic, disconnected from reality. That's inside of us as well. And so nobody is bad or wrong or disordered for entering into those states. We all have the capacity to enter into all of those states. We just have to figure out how to utilize that nervous system, how to tone that vagus nerve, how to access that pharmacy of chemicals that exists within us so that we can stay more in that state of regulation, that state of peace, that state of wholeness. So I started coming across all these different models that were speaking to me, that were speaking to the wisdom that Vaiguruji had, allowed me to access inside of me, that wisdom of the Atma. And then there was other things like internal family systems you mentioned. I'd never come across that. And I was like, oh, like this maps onto what Gurbani says is we've got an internal family too. And then I started doing the Simran and finding people who were talking about the internal family from a Sikhi lens. Like we have our mind, we have the Atma, we have the Panch Jor. Is dehi andar Panch Jor vase. In this body, there are the 5 Jor. And how do they exert influence over our mind? They bring thoughts. Panj Jor Chittava Vikara, Maya Moka Ehipasara. And this is actually what Gurbani is talking about, that Maya is. It's the Panj bringing thoughts. And Gurbani says there's 2 forms of Maya. There's Sukham, which is invisible, and there's Drishtman, or visible Maya. So everything that we experience with our senses is visible Maya. So the body, the possessions, the material world, this 3D reality is visible Maya. But Gurbani says there's another kind of Maya that is actually much more subtle, but much more difficult to overcome. And that is the subtle Maya, that is the Sukha Maya. And Gurbani says, there's a Gurbani tuk, E Maya Mohani, Jin Ved Dante Jag Khaya. That there's this Maya is so intoxicating that even without teeth, it's eaten up the whole world. And this started to speak to me. It's the Sukha Maya. And then I started to understand that the Sukha Maya is our thoughts. Because in Gurbani it says Rajagun, Tamogun, Satogun, Kahiya, E Teri Sab Maya. The 3 states of Rajo, Tamo, and Sato, this is Maya. And what is Rajo Tamosato? Started to delve into that. Rajo is when our mind goes into thought, hopes, wishes, desires, anxieties. Tamo is when our mind goes negative, low vibration thoughts and feelings, slander, hatred, anger, desire, um, negativity, duality. So I started to understand how these are states of mind that we have inside of us that disconnect us from our experiencing ourselves in our true state as Atma, as Jyot Swarup. And I started coming across these people who were talking about similar things. A guy called Dr. Joe Dispenza, I think you're familiar with his work.
Absolutely.
And my friend had messaged me before about him, and I was like, this guy's just trying to make money.
Yeah.
He's just really woo woo, talking about energy. What's this dude about? Not legit. So I just used to, but I was looking at it from different eyes now because I had done the practice myself, and everything he was saying, that we come from source, that at the beginning all there was source, which is what it says in Gurbani. At the beginning all there was such, and then from such came the material world. Sache te pavana paya, pavane te jal hoye, jal te tripavana sajiye, kat kat jot samoye. And he was like, from source comes material, and then Gurbani's like, from source came matter, came born, came the elements, and that was the material realm that was created. And alongside, there was also the Shabad, the spiritual realm, the spiritual side that was infused into every single being, the Anhad Shabad, the Naad, the Naam, the sound that was spoken from Vaiguruji's mouth, from Vaiguruji's mukh. Tera mukh suhava jio, sahaj tod bani. And that was the celestial sound that came from. So at the same time as the material world came into creation, Gurbani was saying that the celestial sound came and was infused into that material realm. And this play was created where the mind's job was to disconnect from the material realm and find that celestial, find that spiritual, and reconnect to the divine and recognize that that mind is actually a drop in the ocean of Vaiguru, actually has all of the qualities that Vaiguru has, that the mind, even though it has the limits of this human body, is unlimited. Joe Dispenza was talking about unlimited. We were talking about how this mind is unlimited. So then what about these labels then? So what about these thoughts I have about myself as I'm this kind of person, I'm an introvert, I've got highly sensitive personality, I've got depression, I've got a propensity to this, that. Where does all that go? So then this is where I started to realize that when we connect to the source, when we start to build that connection through meditation, through Simran, through gaining wisdom, we nothing nothing can get in the way of us being unlimited. It doesn't matter what background, what trauma you've experienced, to what extent you are experiencing mental distress. It doesn't matter what physical limitations you have. It doesn't matter what role you're playing in this current life. You are beyond all of that. You are that Jyot Sarup, Man tu Jyot Sarup hai apna mool pashan. You are that divine light that is connected to Paramatma, and you are Vaiguruji. Nanak Gurmukh aap pashana Prabh jaise abinasi. That when the Gurmukh pashans recognizing themselves, they realize Prabh jaise abinasi, that they are abinasi. They are just as abinasi.
Wow.
So
That's so powerful as you share that all of that wisdom that comes from inside. And so what coming up for me is like what we just spoke just at the start, which was you were saying it's out here or source or God, but then you kind of had that transformation to realize it was in here. And so yeah, a lot of people actually still might be conflicted with that, to might having a mental conception or projection. So I'm just wondering, how did you start to integrate that in your clinical practice, and and maybe not dissociate from the models, but start to actually bring this spirit, this inside knowing or energy into your practice?
So, one of the biggest ways, I had this dilemma too,
Mm,
that how can I explain all of this? How do I get people to start getting beyond their limitations? Because this has really been a long journey for me. Not long, really, actually, but I know it's felt long in that I know how many barriers I had to overcome,
mm,
mental barriers, to getting to the point where I was seeing myself and the world in this way.
mm,
So I was thinking, how do I? And then I realized that that was my analytical mind coming up again.
mm.
How do I do this? How do I do this? How is this going to work? Like, how am I going to, do I need to create a new model? Like, do I need to like write a book? But, and then because I was starting to develop awareness of that part of me, I allowed myself to step back from that. And as I was doing that, and as I as I started to work from a place of being as opposed to that analytical mind, what I started to realize was that simply showing up with with the people in front of me, with clients, and being in that space of connection started to change things in the
Mm,
sessions. There were some clients that a lot of my clients I see on and off throughout their life at different phases, different points where they need a bit of help and they're struggling. And there were some clients that I'd worked with for a long time before all of this happened. And these clients started to get back in touch with me because they were struggling with COVID, etc. And it was just the world of difference. So there was one client, I'm just coming to mind now, who was so disconnected. I would sit with her and she was so depressed. She'd been through so much. There was so much trauma that had happened in her life. And I'd really struggled with her. I was trying to apply models, it just wasn't working. Now I was showing up with this new energy, with this high vibration state. And things started to change. The first session I had back with her, my only job in that session for me was to stay in high vibration.
mm,
So I would meditate before the session. I would meditate with my eyes open in the session, just as I'm doing now. So I'm with you, but I've got a part of me that is trying to stay within connection
mm,
because that's where wisdom comes from. If I come out of that connection now and go into analytical mind, then what's going to be coming is not going to be really that wisdom. It's
mm.
just coming from the mind stuff.
Hey everybody, sorry to interrupt your podcast, but if I could take the time to ask you if you could please subscribe to this channel. This would help me as I grow the channel to share the deep knowledge and wisdom of our guests, and I'd love to share that I'm offering one-to-one coaching if you want to dive deeper and know what lights you up in a safe and professional manner, to do things wholeheartedly for a career you like, and to do things such as meditation, dive into your personality with certain Eastern and Western tools. And I'd love to share with you some of the testimonials I've had from previous clients. So if that floats your boat and you'd like to go slow to go far, then you can have a free strategy session with me. You can visit my website, Jhoty.com. That link should be in the description. Enjoy the rest of the podcast.
So when I'm sitting with clients, when I'm sitting with that lady, I remember she started to become so much more connected in the session. For the first time, I felt her presence with me, and she was saying, I feel different, I feel different today. And I shared with her my journey. I shared with her, I think you're different because I'm different. And, that was the most powerful session I had ever had in my entire life. The first session after doing this work. And I hadn't come in prepared with any models. I hadn't shared any new information. I had simply just showed up in this high vibration state. and it had just unlocked something inside of her, you know? And then I was like, wow, like my preparation, my research for this work is just my own self-development, self-transformation. So this is what I was committing to. Every single time I would see a patient, I knew that all I needed to do, and it's not all because it's not easy to do. In some way, it's easier to cling to models. It's easier to bring analytical mind in. It's more familiar. All I need to do is sit in this high vibration state and allow things to come forth. As the client speaks, as the client sits, my response comes forth from that place of wisdom, from that place of space, from that place of the divine, I guess, um, rather than this place of analytical mind, you know?
Amazing.
So there's that element, but there's also, I did bring models in. I started to bring certain models in that started to appeal to me more, like internal family systems was one, because I was like, well, now I know that I've got mind, Atma, Panchjot inside of me. You know, now I know that I've got that internal family system. I can use that in my work. So when I work with clients now, how we start to access this idea of unlimited and source and Atma is through this idea that actually we have different parts of us. So when a client will come and sit in front of me and say, you know, I'm such a bad person because of X, Y, and Z, or, you know, my husband is such a bad person and he's to blame for all of my problems, we start to introduce this idea of parts, that actually there's a part of us that shows up in this way, in a state of anger, in a state of defensiveness. There's a part of you, there's a part of me that is showing up and coming from a place of greed or coming from a place of desire, you know? And there's a part that is pure love, joy, has all of the wisdom, is perfect, is complete, is whole, is a pure being. That is inside of you too, you know, and people relate to that because they see that sometimes I can be such a nice person or sometimes things are going so well, or sometimes I love my partner and sometimes I hate and detest him, and you know, so it's like, well, this is it, it's not. And you know, and you know, people for so long, then we scour the internet and we're like, okay, well, my husband's a narcissist, or I'm a narcissist, or you know, this person is toxic, or it's because of my trauma, or it's because of my trauma bonds, or it's because my mother and my father. And of course, those things all have validity and they do shape us, you know. But, you know, the thing is that when we hold on to those narratives, we see ourselves and other people in absolute ways. And we're stuck then. We can't move from that. So if you're narcissistic, what do? You're done for. You know, if you're an angry person, that's it. What do? You're done for. You know, if you're an introvert or you've got highly sensitive personality, well, you've got limits, right? But when you see a part of you has shown up in this way, but there's a part of you that has everything you could ever need and want, and you know, is the highest state you could ever attain as a human being, and you have that inside of you too, that changes everything.
Yeah, it's such a powerful way of looking at it, and it brings so much more compassion and discernment. And
Yeah.
because we realize like everyone's the same, but they might just be stuck in those burden state. And
Yeah.
I'll edit it afterwards so viewers also have a visual representation of internal family systems. But I was wondering if you could explain a bit more for viewers who are not familiar with maybe these firefighter, exile, and I believe manager parts and how they map on to, like you said, the Atma and Maya, and maybe explain, I think, what the Satugun is, because I think you're explaining what Rajgun and Tamgun is. So how, so people get maybe a understanding to move from the intellect into more of like a internal place of recognizing these things.
Where do I start?
Sorry if it was too much.
You've got like 20 minutes to like cover, like yeah, there's a lot here. So let me think of how I can bring this today to you in a way that's accessible and helpful. So the specifics of the internal family system, like the firefighters, the exile, so that I don't actually use right now.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because I haven't delved into it enough. And also, right now, just being at the place of just exploring ourselves as being parts
Mm-hmm.
has been enough. Sometimes I bring the idea of the exiles in, the vulnerable parts of ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes have become created on the basis of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very vulnerable parts of ourselves that, protectors try and keep, out of sight, out of mind. Um, but yeah, I'm gonna say for now that I don't want to really delve into that too much and
Sure.
separating and elucidating the parts, if that's okay. You probably know more about it than me. Um,
Yeah, it's
so,
completely fine.
but yeah, that's a kind of training that I'm gonna possibly embark on if the wisdom takes me there,
Okay.
because I think. But in terms of the internal family, the way I use it from a Gurmat side
Mm.
is that in these dragon are also part of that internal family. So if I had a whiteboard right now,
Mm-hmm.
usually I use whiteboard, but I could draw it all.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I could share something for viewers at some
Yes.
later point that I could send to you that has all of the internal family. So it's quite complex when it comes to Gurbani. It's like there's mind, there's Atma, there's dragon,
Mm.
there's Chitragupt, there's Dharamraj, there's Jam, um, and there's the mind, which is the player, which is the driver of the body. And Gurbani says that we have huts inside our body, like shops, like hut. I can't remember the tuk, but hut patan bajara. Like Gurbani describes this body as like a shopping center in a way, and that we have these dragon inside of us. We have Rajo, Tamo, and Sato, and those are different shops, you could say. And the mind is given a certain amount of wealth when it comes into this world, a punji. Um, and the mind is taught actually before it's entered into the body how to play this game, how to use this money, how to use this currency so that you get profit. So it talks about profit in Gurbani quite a lot, laha.
Mm.
And in Gurbani, it says that the mind spends its breaths, the swas, this punji, this wealth, in different ways. And there are four places that it can spend this swas, these breaths in. It can spend these swas, these breaths in Rajogun, which is where the mind goes to do its livelihood. So its ambitions, hopes, desires, which then turns into often chinta, fikr, so fears, anxieties, worries. So the mind can either go to Rajogun, where it spends its breaths, or it goes into Tamogun,
Mm.
where it's a lot in negativity, a lot. Often when the expectations from Rajogun haven't been met, it goes into Tamogun, it goes into Krodh, anger, goes into um, desires of the body. It goes into negativity, jealousy, hatred, dubda, um, slander, gossip. And the mind can go there and spend its breaths there, its precious wealth there. Or it can spend its precious wealth in Satogun, which Gurbani says is compassion, patience, tolerance. Dharam is in there, like
Mm.
religion, faith. So, or it can spend its breaths there. Now, there's another space as well, which is called Nirgunda Hut, the hut of the divine, of Nirgun,
Mm.
of Vaigruji, where the mind can spend its breaths. And that is when the mind goes beyond those three aspects of Maya, Rajotamo and Sato, and it spends its breaths in that fourth realm, the Jotapad, Dasamdwar, Sun, Sahaj, Nirgun, Begumpura Shar, all these names in Gurbani that are used to describe that space that the mind can go into when it becomes free of thoughts, where it starts to disconnect from this body and go into that spiritual realm.
Mm.
And when the mind starts to spend its time there, in that fourth state, it's also called our true home, Nijkar, Tirkar, um, which is placed inside of us. And when the mind starts to spend its swas and its breaths there, that's where it's getting profit.
Mm.
That's where it's actually starting to achieve the purpose of its life, its existence, which is to start to walk that journey back to experiencing Vaiguru and meeting Vaiguru, Gobind Milan ki eh teri bariya, actually meeting that divine, seeing that divine, hearing the voice of that divine,
Mm.
speaking with that divine. And this is when it starts to become the divine. And Gurbani says that, that the purpose of this life is to merge into the divine whilst we are living. So this is about what happens when we die. If we can't merge into the divine whilst we are living, we aren't going to be able to merge when we die at that last breath. So that internal system that's inside of us is about how do we start to monitor where is the mind spending its breaths? Does it spend all of its breath in Rajogun all day long and then go into Tamil? Or is it starting to walk a path that is taking it outside of that realm of Maya, which is Rajo to Sattva? So again, if I could draw this, I will show you a visual of this
And I'll put it up afterwards.
there's a path from Rajo to Sattva, which is called Sant Ka Marg Dharam Ki Paudi. That is called the Marg of love, live that rasta. That is the path that we walk that in this human body, we can enter into that state of the divine. The other path is the path of Tat, the materialistic path. Gurbani says, live Tat, doe raah hai, hukmi kar kamai. Live and Tat are the two paths. So that path of live is the one that takes us to our home. So when I even bring these concepts into my work, there are people who aren't interested in God and meeting God and haven't really got that thinking process or just aren't open to that just yet, right? So instead we talk about contentment, love, joy. We talk about all of the qualities that they want to experience within themselves and how to walk that path. And we can use that same model and system and even the nervous system models comes in. Sorry, I'm jumping around, but again, I'll show some visuals here.
Of course,
The
yeah.
polyvagal theory talks about the three nervous system states, which kind of align with Rajo Tamo Sattva. This is where it gets exciting because I'm like doing the spiritual Sikhi self-discovery work over here, which is talking about Rajo Tamo Sattva. I'm like, how does this even map onto anything that I can use?
Yeah.
And then you've got the three nervous system states, which map on. You've got the state of regulation, where you've got, which is, I usually use a traffic light system, green, amber, and red. But they've all got names as well, ventral vagal, dorsal vagal.
That's
Like
right.
these are all physiological pathways within us. And the Sattvagun maps onto what we call the green zone, where I think it's ventral vagal, correct me if I'm wrong, where you're in that state of contentment, compassion, confidence. You can connect with your environment. You are open to connection, and whether people are open to connection to others or the divine, same thing. So this is where you're open to a state of connection. That maps onto Sattva. Then you've got the Rajogun, where you're in that fight flight energy, where you've got things to do. You're in drive energy. You're busy, busy, busy. You're focused on the material world. Your vision is narrowed to this 3D reality, and that's when you're in Rajogun. That's when you're in that fight flight mode. And then you've got the completely disconnected, lowest vibration state, which I think is dorsal vagal. And that pathway maps onto Tamil, that very low vibration, heaviness, the negativity, the depression, the hate, the self-hate, all of that maps onto that. So using that system, we can see how it's about learning to spend more time in Sattva, how to use that model that we know and then the science that we know. And if we want to bring in the Gurbani, we can if people are open to it. But one of the exciting things is that we know scientifically that we can turn that vagus nerve online. We can go into that state of regulation through different things that we can do, different strategies, different exercises. And one is, believe it or not, scientifically, engaging the vocal system and engaging the hearing system in such a way that then taps into that vagus system and turns that vagus nerve on and puts you into a state of regulation.
Wow.
And what is that? Chanting and listening. What is it Gurbani tells us? That when we chant with the tongue and we listen with the ears, Sravani Suniya Rasana Gaya. When we place our attention in the sound, Dona Mehetyan, that is how we start to access this state of regulation and beyond the fourth realm. So science is like saying all the stuff that Gurbani is saying, mantra meditation. And they've shown, they've done, this is one of the strategies that they use to get people to start toning their vagus nerve and shaping their nervous system and coming back into regulation.
Amazing. As you share that, it's just unlocking profound levels for me as well, and hopefully the listeners as well, about just the wisdom of the gurus. And now science is kind of like uncovering and understanding this, and hopefully more people can access this. Before we go into Simran, I think it's also helpful for the viewers to know in our previous dialogues on Ayurveda that the Tamo, Sattva, Rajas is all present in the material plane. So the foods we eat, the work we do, our personality. But we're here talking about and specifically on the mind. So as we go from the sattvic to the next stage, you mentioned Nam or Nad. So those people who, after um, cultivating those compassion, these virtues, these guns, how are they? What is that they're listening to in the internal state? So we had previous dialogues on the chakra system about the heart, and of course, Shabad Guru is there. But for viewers who are maybe not um, familiar with Sikhi, what are these terminologies that you mentioned? For example, Nam and Nad.
Yeah. So Gurbani tells us that Gurbani talks about the chakra as well. She Kar, She Gur, She Upades. That as we do the meditation, as we use the Jugti, because in Gurbani it says there is a Jugti, there is a method. Ram Kehen Meh Ped Hai. There is a wisdom as to how to chant, how to connect with that internal Shabad Guru that you've just alluded to. Very much within Sikhi, we think of Guruji as just Tan Tan Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, and they are our Guru, Tan Tan Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. But Tan Tan Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji joins us, unites us with our internal Satguru, Shabad Guru. Shabad Guru, Surt Tona Chela. And that Surti is the Chela, is the servant of that Shabad Guru. That Shabad Guru is the source of all creation and is the sound of Vaheguruji's voice. Tera mukh sohava. Your mukh is beautiful, Vaheguru. Sahaj tun bani. And your bani is the Sahaj tun. Is that tun, is Anhad Shabad, is Sahaj tun, is Nad. All of these names, words that are used in Gurbani to describe the thing that can't be described but only experienced, which is that internal celestial sound that emanates from Vaheguruji's mukh, that is inside everything and everyone and outside of everything and everyone. And it is that we use as a pathway to connect back to Vaheguru, to enter into that divine realm. In fact, Gurbani says that when the mind starts to come out of these three qualities of Maya, then it goes into that fourth realm. And the sign of that, and the nishani of the mind going into that fourth realm, is that it starts to hear that celestial sound. Not with these ears, with the sukham ears. The old me would have just ridiculed this, to be honest. People would talk about this around me, and I would say, you're making it up. It's a hallucination. It's a figment of your mind. If you want to believe that something, you're going to hear something, you're going to hear it. That was what I was saying before. But as my journey through experience, practical, started doing that meditation, spending time there, now I understand. I can experience it for myself. And Gurbani says, "No dar thake tavat rahai, dasave nijgar vasa pai." When you come above the 9 doors of the body, no dar thake, you close them. Tavat rahai, dasave nijgar vasa pai. That is when you go into your dasam dwar, your nijgar. So when you chant, Vah, Guru, Vah, Guru, Vah, Guru, Vah, Guru, you're trying to close those 9 doors. Naturally, what will happen is As you start to chant and you're engaging, you're immersing your mind in that dhun, in that Shabad Guru, you're chanting, you're listening, your mind will start to become parvesh in your dasam duar, in your nijkar, and the chanting will stop.
Mm.
But it takes time. It takes not time, not really, but what I mean is it's a journey.
Mm.
Because it's beyond space and time, it can happen in a second, it can happen in an instant. It's not a game of time here. This realm is beyond time and space, but it's a journey that as we start to use this mantra to disconnect from the material realm, you get to a point where you no longer experience your body. Joe Dispenza says, nowhere, no time, no space. I don't know what else he says, but I love that. I love it because that is where the mantra takes you,
Mm.
where you go into sun, where you no longer have awareness of your body anymore. That means you've closed the 9 doors. You're not getting feedback from your senses anymore. It's like when you're asleep,
Mm.
you're not getting any feedback from your senses. You're still alive. Your mind is still in your body,
Mm.
but you don't know what's happening around you. You're not getting any sensory feedback. And that's the mind being in its true home when we go to sleep. And that's what we want to try and get to when we're awake in our day to day, to take the mind into that state of sun.
Mm.
Now it says in Gurbani, Naudar Thake Davat Rahai, Dasve Nij Kar Vasa Pai. So the mind is in the Dasam Dwar. And what happens there? Othe Anhad Shabad Vajja Din Rati. In that space, the Anhad Shabad resounds day and night. Gurmati Shabad Sunavaniya. And there the mind listens to that, listens and listens day and night, day and night. And then as the mind listens and develops, establishes love with that sound, what is that sound giving us? That is not just a sound, that is an instruction, that is a wisdom, that is a katha,
Mm.
that is Vaiguruji's katha, that is a gatha katha. We are gaining wisdom from listening to the Anhad Shabad, from listening to Vaiguruji's hukam. Because Gurbani says, Eko naam hukam hai. What is hukam? What is Vaiguruji's command? What is Vaiguruji's instruction? Eko naam. How? Because when we listen, the mind is washed and cleansed from all of those beliefs, conditioning that has accumulated upon the mind for lifetimes.
Mm.
That is being washed so that the mind starts to access the true self that is underneath all of that mal, that dirt, what it says in Gurbani, but it's
Mm.
conditioning, it's the thoughts, belief systems. The mind starts to disconnect from that and recognize the truth of Jyot Sarup.
Mm.
And we know that we believe that Vaiguruji is the highest intelligence, right? That
Mm.
intelligence that has created and sustains this whole universe. That intelligence that allows the body to heal when it gets cut. That intelligence that allows a woman to birth a baby,
Mm.
right? That's an intelligence beyond any intelligence that can be held within this material realm.
Mm.
Now imagine when you spend time connecting and listening and hearing the instruction, that intelligence is accessible to you. That intelligence, that wisdom, that level of love,
Mm.
that is accessible to you. And that is what this path for me is. When you listen and you listen and you listen to this Shabad Guru, that instruction, you transform. Your subconscious mind transforms. All of those beliefs, habits, ways of being that exist and control us, you know, those get washed away.
Amazing. And it just seems to me like everything we're doing in therapy and coaching, all these karmic loops, almost conditioning, that is it. Spending the time in that presence, that beingness, um, yeah, washes that away. So the way you explained it's so beautiful and I think relatable for a lot of people as well. I think just as we wrap up, if you could explain practically how uh, to deepen people's practice of Simran. I think Simran means remembrance. What does that dhyan or surti mean for people who've maybe not even done Simran before, or maybe outside of the Sikh tradition? What do these concepts mean, and how can they start to do this sort of mantra meditation?
So the great thing about spirituality and Waheguru and the divine is that you don't have to follow a particular religion. You don't have to follow the same mantra.
Mm,
You don't have to even use a mantra, you know. You Gurbani is and Sikhi is above religion.
mm,
It's beyond religion. But religion can help, of course. And Sikhi is, with Guruji's Kirpa, we have so much wisdom within Guru Granth Sahib Ji to speak to us about how do we actually walk this internal journey.
mhm,
So just to make it practical, whatever mantra you use from whatever faith you are, whether you chant Ram, whether you chant Allahu, whether you chant Vah, Guru, it's the same process, the technique that's given in Gurbani.
mm,
That we really have to immerse ourselves in the sound. Why? Because the sound has no form, it has no roop. Chakkar chehen ar baranjat arpat nahanije, roop rang ar rekh bek ko kehna sakat ke, achal murat anpau prakash. That Vaiguruji has no form. The Vaiguruji's form is anpau prakash, light. And the sound has no form. You can't write a sound, you know, in terms of if I make a sound like bzz, how do you write that? Or how do you write that? So if we want to go into the space of beyond form, the sound can take us there. So
mm,
that's why sound is very important. So it starts off by listening to the sound of the voice that we create here with the mouth, with the rasana. So we chant. So Vah Guru, Vah Guru, or Allah Hu,
mm,
Allah Hu, whatever.
mm,
You chant and you immerse yourself in the sound. Don meh dhyan mein janiya, right?
mm,
So as you start to connect to the sound of your voice, so this is really crucial that before you sit down to meditation, just remind yourself what you're doing. Because chanting with the tongue is not going to do it just that on its own. If the mind isn't present, nothing's happening.
mm,
Okay. So if you're chanting, you really want to immerse your mind in the sound of yourself chanting. That's what you want to be listening to. Thoughts will come, and that's the process. It's still a really good meditation, even if thoughts come.
mm,
But our practice is just to bring the mind back to the sound time and time again, time and time again. Now, when you start to do that, you start to immerse yourself in that practice, you will start to go beyond the 9 doors. So you will stop chanting. You will disconnect from your body. You will go into a state of sun or sleep. And you will do that time and time again. You will go into that sun, into that sun. In Gurbani says, Satgur te pae vichara, sun samad sache karbara. That sun samad is our true home. So we'll go into that true home time and time again. And then slowly, slowly, as we develop the practice, we will start to awaken in that state. And what will we hear in that state of sun? We will start to hear the Anhad Shabad. We will start to hear the celestial sound. And dhyan is when the mind doesn't chant anymore, now comes away from this physical body, and it does dhyan, it listens to the Shabad Guru. Shabad Guru, Surta Tuna Chela. It's when the mind, the Surti, becomes a Chela, a servant of the internal Shabad Guru.
mm.
And then the mind will listen and listen. And that is the practice of dhyan.
Wow, that's beautiful. And yeah, it connects us to that state. Our thoughts, our actions all come from there. And yeah, like you said, it's
Absolutely. And then also, you just pointed to something else that I didn't mention, but it's not enough to meditate with your eyes closed.
mm,
Okay. because you can do that for some time, and that's brilliant, and you will feel a sense of bliss. But if you open your eyes and your mind goes back into Rajo Tamo Sato
Mm.
all day long, you're in a state of disconnection. So you won't have as much access to that state of bliss inside of you. So this is where this is very, very important. And this is where I think many of us struggle, is we have a really good meditation,
Mm.
but when we come into this waking moment, we come away from that connection
Mm.
and we find ourselves back in Rajo Tamo Sato. So in Gurbani it says, Uthat Baitat Sovat Naam, that we have to practice our meditation on and off the mat, eyes closed and eyes open.
Mm.
And yeah,
Yeah.
so there's a lot practically to that, but we might not have enough time to go into that just
Yeah.
now.
Well, I'd love to have you on again and talk about that. So it's like the inner anchoring and about when we're
Yeah,
in the waking state. I think that's really powerful.
that's it. Exactly that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for coming on
You.
and sharing your wisdom with everyone,
Thank
sharing the
you.
Guru's wisdom. Is there anything else you'd like to share with people? I know we've discussed a lot, but I like to say in my coaching, go slow to go far for people. So, in what ways do you feel that people could indeed go slow to go far?
Just if this conversation has appealed to you and you kind of want to explore it further, open yourself up to that.
Mm.
You know, just speak to the universe or your mind or whoever you feel is out there or inside, and just start to set that intention that you want to explore this further. An internal prayer in a way, or an internal, if there is a yearning there, just giving space to that, giving time to that, opening yourself up to that voice inside that is searching for that connection, and spending time with it, whether you're at the point where you want to meditate or not. You can, if you do that, you will find things that come up in around you, on YouTube, on the internet, in front of you. Things will come up that will help you to walk on that path further.
Mm.
So I would just say be open. And again, as I said before, it doesn't matter who you think you are, who you think you've been, what has happened to you, how you think that's shaped you, what limits you place on yourself, what labels you've given yourself. Nothing is greater than this unlimited power that we are able to tap into and that we can experience. So we are beyond all of that baggage.
Mm. Thank you. And if people feel inspired to connect or maybe attend one of the workshops to learn more or actually need some support, where can people contact you?
So they can contact me on Instagram at Dr Darshan Kaur. I have an Instagram profile. I have a website, which is drdarshankaur.com, I think. So you can, and then all my contact details are there. So you're more than welcome to contact me through there.
Perfect. And I'll put all the links in the description below as well for people who
Thank you.
want to contact. Oh, thank
Thank
you
you.
so much again for your time, for sharing today. And of course, thank you everybody as well for taking the time to listen. Thank you.
Thank you very much.